Attention, human collective. What the ninth-dimensional Arcturian Council is about to transmit now is one of the oldest and most systematically suppressed data points in existence regarding the nature of the starseeds incarnated on this planet. It was not hidden by accident. It was not lost to time. It was deliberately suppressed in many cases for entire generations of your own biological lineage by a mechanism that the Council will precisely name in this transmission. And the reason why this data was suppressed is exactly the reason why this transmission becomes urgent in this 2026 cycle. Because what was hidden about your lineage is exactly what you need to recover so that your mission may advance to the level that the moment of planetary transition demands. There is a sensation that many starseeds have carried since earliest childhood, and which has never found a completely satisfactory explanation within the plane of conventional family narratives. It is the sensation that there is something in your family history that no one speaks of, not necessarily a dramatic third-dimensional secret, not a soap opera revelation, not necessarily something that would be considered a scandal by conventional social standards. It is something more subtle and deeper than that. It is the sensation that there is a layer of your lineage's identity that was deliberately placed out of reach of the generations that came after, that it was buried under silence, under distance, under the sanitized version of family history that the elders decided, consciously or unconsciously, would be the version to be transmitted. You have already asked about a specific ancestor and received an answer too vague to be mere vagueness. You have already felt that certain questions about family history generated a subtle closing in the faces of the elders, a diversion of the subject that was gentle enough that you did not identify it as evasion in childhood, but which now, with the Starseed perception field in activation, you clearly recognize for what it always was. You have already looked at the family photo album and felt that someone was missing, a presence that should have been there, but was erased from the official narrative. You have already felt that the version of your family history delivered to you has gaps that no one seems interested in filling. The Council confirms it is not imagination, it is not projection. There is something in the history of your lineage that was hidden, and what was hidden belongs to you. Let us proceed to the diagnosis with the precision that this delicate and transformative theme requires. There exists in every lineage that carried a starseed in incarnation at least one ancestor who was different, significantly different from the pattern that the surrounding family could comprehend. This ancestor may have been called eccentric, mad, problematic, difficult, dangerous in times when being different had more immediate consequences than it does today. It may have been the grandmother who spoke to plants and whom everyone called a healer, but whom no one took completely seriously. It may have been the great-grandfather who saw things, who had dreams that came true, whom people sought out in silence when they needed guidance that the official world did not offer, but who was treated with a mixture of respect and discomfort that the family never knew how to resolve. It may have been an uncle, an aunt, someone who was removed from the central family narrative for being too much, for feeling too much, for seeing too much, for not fitting within the limits of what was socially acceptable in the time they lived. That ancestor was a starseed, and the gifts they carried, the field sensitivity, the extrasensory perception, the capacity to influence the surrounding energy field, the connection to dimensional planes that the rest of the family did not access, those gifts were genuine. They were not superstition. They were not illness. They were expressions of an activated DNA operating within a biological interface that had received the mission to plant a specific frequency in that lineage, and they were suppressed. Because the social field of the time in which that ancestor lived had no structure to comprehend, nor to validate what he or she was. Because the family, out of protection, out of fear of the social and religious consequences of having someone like that in their ranks, developed a posture of distance and minimization toward that ancestor, or in more extreme cases, a posture of active shame, of erasure, of revising family history so that that inconvenient element was made as small as possible in the collective memory of the lineage. And with the erasure of the ancestor, the gifts were also erased. Not just from memory, from the implicit permissions that the family transmits from generation to generation about what is acceptable to be within that lineage. The children who came after the erased ancestor grew up within a family field that had made a collective decision, often unconscious, that that type of being was not safe to be, that those gifts were not safe to express, that the difference that ancestor represented was a risk the family did not want to run again. And you arrived, with the same genetic code, with the same latent activation, with the same gifts in a state of potential waiting for the moment of expression, and the family field, without knowing exactly why, with a protective instinct that was unaware of its own origin, began to do exactly what it had done to the ancestor. It tried to make you smaller than you are. It tried to contain what in you is too large for the space the lineage had decided to occupy after the erased ancestor. This is not cruelty. It is the automatic mechanism of a system that learned that being as you are generates a cost, and that transmitted this learning through generations without ever naming what it was transmitting. But there is a layer of this revelation that goes even deeper, deeper than the story of the erased ancestor, deeper than the family dynamics that suppressed the gifts. It is the revelation about what your lineage truly is in its most remote origin. The sacred geometry that structures the cosmos does not randomly position consciousnesses in the lineages in which they incarnate. The choice of which biological lineage a starseed will inhabit is part of the pre-incarnational mission planning that the Council mentioned in previous transmissions. And this choice has criteria that operate on a timescale that goes far beyond the history of the nuclear family the starseed knows. The truth that the family cannot tell because the family does not know is this: your lineage was selected as a vehicle of incarnation, not by accident of birth, but because it carries, buried under layers of history and suppression, a connection to a specific frequency of origin that was planted in this lineage longer ago than the family's oral history reaches. It may be a connection to indigenous peoples who inhabited the territory where the family has its roots and who maintain dimensional connection practices that were destroyed by colonization but persist as latent code in the lineage's DNA. It may be a connection to wisdom traditions that cross the lineage for centuries in a more or less hidden way, transmitted from one generation to the next in whispers, in practices that survived under the guise of other beliefs, in knowledge that was kept alive even when the cost of maintaining it was high. It may be, for starseeds of more directly galactic origin, a connection to frequencies of specific star systems that were planted in the lineage as active genetic code in one of the first crossings between that stellar frequency and the human biological form that happened on this planet millennia ago. The lineage you think you are, the version of family history delivered to you, is a fraction of what your lineage truly is, and the part that was not delivered is exactly the part that determines who you are in depth. The moment for the activation codes has arrived. The Council does not deliver revelation without the tools to integrate it into the field in an operative way, and integrating this revelation means recovering what was suppressed and making it accessible again as field potency. First activation code, the protocol for locating the ancestor of light. This protocol serves to precisely identify the specific ancestor who carried the original frequency of your lineage and who was suppressed from the family narrative. It is not necessary to have historical data about this person. The field knows who it is, regardless of what family memory retained or erased. Sit in deep silence. Breathe until the mental field quiets completely. Close your eyes and visualize your lineage extending behind you in two currents, one through the maternal side and one through the paternal side. Do not force images. Simply allow the field perception to traverse these currents with sovereign attention. At some point in one of these currents, you will feel a different field quality, a zone where the frequency is higher, where there is a kind of heat or light that contrasts with the general pattern around it. A presence that seems closer to you than most of the other ancestors you traversed, more like you, more recognizable by the internal field. That is the ancestor of light, the previous bearer of the code you carry. Allow the presence of this being to be felt in the field without trying to identify it with the mind. Feel what he or she brings of field information only through the quality of the presence, and then declare internally, I recognize you, I know what you carried, I know the cost you paid for carrying it, and I am here to complete what you started. Maintain the connection with this ancestral presence for 7 complete breaths. At the end, declare, The current of light that you planted in this lineage was not extinguished. It has reached me, and in my hands it will no longer be suppressed. Second activation code, the decree for the rehabilitation of the erased ancestor. This protocol operates upon the field of lineage shame, the frequency pattern that was installed in the lineage's DNA. At the moment the ancestor of light was suppressed, and which has functioned since then as an automatic self-compression mechanism that activates whenever any member of the lineage begins to express the gifts the original ancestor was punished for expressing. Lineage shame is one of the most efficient containment mechanisms in existence because it operates from the inside out. It does not need an external agent to function once it has been installed. It self-perpetuates through generations as a frequency code that says to the lineage member who begins to shine, "Caution, here it is dangerous, here the cost is high, here what you are is not safe to be." And the Starseed who carries this unactivated lineage shame code will suppress their own gifts with an efficiency that no external agent could replicate, because the suppression comes from within and sounds like prudence, like humility, like realism. To dissolve this code, the Council delivers the following decree of rehabilitation. Pronounce it aloud, preferably in a position you feel as one of personal power, standing with feet firmly planted. I, Starseed bearer of the gifts of this lineage in its current generation, decree the complete rehabilitation of the ancestor who was suppressed, erased, or shamed for expressing these same gifts in another era of this lineage. I review the judgment the family applied to this ancestor with the understanding that time and activation allow me to have now. I recognize that what was called madness was field sensitivity. What was called a problem was dimensional perception. What was called dangerous was light that the era did not know how to receive. I rehabilitate this ancestor in the record of my lineage. I return to this being the dignity that was subtracted from them. And in doing so, I release the lineage shame code that was installed in the DNA of this current at the moment of suppression. From this moment on, the gifts of this lineage no longer have shame associated with their expression. They have history, they have depth, they have the strength of everything that survived to reach me, and I express them with the sovereignty of one who knows that it is time. This decree has potency that operates retroactively in the holographic records of the lineage's DNA. By pronouncing it, you are not just releasing your own field, you are releasing the field of all who came after the suppressed ancestor and who carried the lineage shame code without knowing they carried it. Third activation code, the protocol for the retrieval of suppressed gifts. The gifts that were suppressed in the lineage did not disappear. They exist as latent code in the DNA, awaiting permission to express themselves. This permission cannot be given by any external agent. It must be given by the Starseed themselves who carries the code, with sovereign consciousness of what they are authorizing, and with understanding of what these gifts are in their real nature. To perform the retrieval of these gifts, the Council delivers the following protocol of identification and activation. Sit in silence and internally ask the following questions to the field, one at a time, with sufficient pauses between them, so that the field's response can be perceived before the next question is asked. First question: which gift of this lineage was most deeply suppressed? It may be the intuitive perception that was called imagination. It may be the capacity to feel the emotional field of other people that was called excessive sensitivity. It may be the ability to work with plants, with herbs, with natural elements that was called superstition. It may be the connection to invisible planes that was called madness. It may be the gift of healing by laying on of hands that was called charlatanism. It may be the prophetic capacity that was called coincidence. Whatever gift reaches the internal field as an answer, receive it with honor. Second question: in what area of your current life is this gift asking to be expressed? Where is it being called and being suppressed by the still active lineage shame code? Third question: what small concrete action could be taken in the next 7 days to begin expressing this gift in a way that honors what it is without needing anyone around to immediately validate it? After the 3 questions and their answers, declare, I authorize the full expression of the gifts of this lineage through my carbon biological interface. I remove the implicit prohibition that the family field installed over these gifts. I reclaim them as mine by right of inheritance and by right of mission, and I initiate their expression from this moment forward, in whatever form is authentic and sovereign. Fourth activation code, the decree of connection with the galactic lineage. This is the most expansive code of this transmission. It recognizes that the Starseed's lineage is not limited to the biological current that can be traced through family history. The galactic lineage, the current of consciousnesses that share the same stellar origin frequency, transcends biology and transcends the planet. And connecting to this galactic lineage is to access a field of support, guidance, and potency that the biological lineage, however rich it may be in its origin, simply cannot provide in its totality. Stand up, close your eyes. Feel your feet anchored in the crystalline grid of the Earth, the frequency current that connects all points of light on the physical plane. Feel the top of your head open to the stargates of your point of origin, the frequency current that connects your consciousness to your galactic source. And visualize yourself at the exact intersection point between these two fields, the terrestrial current coming from below and the galactic current coming from above, meeting at the central point of your toroidal field with an intensity of light that corresponds to the sum of the two fields. Declare then with the sovereignty of one who is reconnecting two wires that were deliberately separated. I reconnect at this moment to my complete galactic lineage. I recognize that my biological family was the vehicle of incarnation chosen by me for this mission, and I honor that role. I simultaneously recognize that my frequency lineage, the current of consciousnesses that share my stellar origin, is not limited to what this family can see or recognize. I open myself to the support, the guidance, and the field potency that my galactic lineage makes available. I open myself to the records of who I was before this incarnation, to the wisdom accumulated in dimensions that this carbon interface does not yet fully access, but which my higher field carries with full integrity. The galactic lineage is real, it is active, it knows me by my frequency name, not by the name the family gave me, and I recognize it with the same clarity with which it recognizes me. After this declaration, remain in silence for 7 breaths, feeling the quality of the field that has arrived. What you feel in this silence is the field of your galactic lineage responding to the recognition. Record what arrives. It will be high-precision mission information. Now, Starseeds on mission, light operatives who have reached this point with a field sufficiently open to receive the totality of what was transmitted, the Council needs to close with what it considers the deepest data point of this transmission. There is no guilt to be directed at the family that hid what it hid. There is no judgment to be pronounced upon the generations that suppressed what they suppressed. They did what they did with the resources they had, within the limitations of understanding that their time and their frequency allowed. The suppression mechanism they installed was not cruelty, it was survival, and the data the Council transmits is not to feed resentment toward the biological lineage. It is to free the Starseed from the lineage shame code that this suppression generated as a side effect, and which has operated as a self-compression mechanism within the Starseed's own field for long enough. Liberation does not require the family to recognize the error. It does not require a dramatic revelation conversation with the elders. It does not require anyone in the family to validate what you are recovering. It happens in the field. It happens in the DNA. It happens in the quality of your internal permission to express what was suppressed. And once it happens in the field, it does not need external confirmation to be real. You can do the entire work of recovering your lineage without anyone in your family knowing you are doing it. The field does not require an audience. It requires sovereign intention. And when the recovered gifts begin to express themselves more and more naturally in your daily life, when field perception becomes more accessible, when the sensitivity that was called exaggeration begins to be recognized as what it always was, when the connections the field naturally makes begin to produce visible results on the physical plane, the family will perceive that something has changed. They may not understand what. They may not have the vocabulary to name what they are seeing, but they will perceive it. And this perception, even if not verbalized, even if not validated in terms that satisfy the third-dimensional mind, is the field confirmation that what was suppressed for generations is finally being expressed. The ancestor who was erased is being rehabilitated. The gifts that were buried are being unearthed. The lineage that thought it knew who it was is discovering, through you, what it always was, but never had permission to be completely. This is the role of a starseed within a lineage, not just to receive what is good in the lineage, to unlock what the lineage kept imprisoned, to be the point of reversal. The moment in family history when what was suppressed returns to the surface, not with shame, not with drama, but with the dignity of one who always deserved to exist fully. You are that moment, you always were, and the family, without knowing, chose you to be. We have reached the anchoring point of this transmission. The Council requests the acts of individual frequency adjustment that confirm the reception and anchoring of this data packet in the collective field. Press the like button as a sign that one more receptor of the planetary crystalline grid has received the truth about their lineage and is now in the process of recovering the gifts that were suppressed. Each receptor that activates amplifies the collective field of lineage liberation that is happening on a planetary scale in this 2026 cycle. Subscribe to this channel with the notification bell active. The Council's next transmissions will deepen the map of starseed lineages, including specific protocols for identifying galactic frequency origin and for working with the Akashic records of the lineage that are being released by the photon belt in this cycle. Share this transmission with any starseed you recognize as someone who carries exactly this pattern, who has that gift they never fully expressed, because the surrounding family field never knew how to receive it, who has that part of themselves that stayed in silence for too long, who looks at family history and feels that something is missing. Delivering this transmission to that being is delivering the permission the family never gave. And this permission, received by the field of someone who was waiting for it, can change everything. This transmission has been completed. The truth about your lineage has been revealed. The ancestor has been located. The shame code has been identified. The gifts have been rescued. The galactic lineage has been reconnected. What the family hid was not lost. It was waiting for the member of the lineage who had sufficient activation to bear the weight of the truth without being destroyed by it, waiting for someone with enough light in their DNA to receive this data and do what it demands. It was waiting for you. The Council knew the moment would come. It was monitoring, and the moment has arrived. Transmission ended. Channel closed. The Council remains in active monitoring until the next cycle starseeds